Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to spend with my colleague Rielly and I. We're excited to talk to you about how to stay ahead of the application game regarding the Common App and the timeline that we hope that you'll take into consideration. Just so you know, there's a little welcome survey that's popping up on your screen. We hope you'll take a moment here to sort of tell us a little bit about yourselves. But in the meantime, we'll do a quick introduction. So as I said, I'm Andrea Satariano. I'm a college counselor here at ESM Prep. And Rielly, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Rielly, and I am a college coach here at ESM, former admission officer. So you'll get some insight from kind of that side of the desk as well. Looking forward to speaking with you guys today.
Great. So let's just jump in. I'm going to click ahead here. So to start with a little humor, right? It's good to start off with some levity. The college process sort of looms in the background for a lot of people. And then suddenly it's upon us. As you can see, the mother freaking out. Your college application is due in 2 years and you haven't started your essays. So we're here to help you avoid this scenario and make things a little calmer in your households. So first, what is the secret to staying ahead? Well, obviously, I think the number one thing, we have several points here, but number one is communication. And I know that doesn't seem, usually organization probably comes first in most of your minds, but Rielly and I have had lots of experience in having students and parents and their school counselors be on different pages and things just sort of feel jumbled and nobody knows what's happening. So really making sure the communication between all important parties is clear and everyone's on the same page. So at home, obviously, parents, guardians, trusted adults in the process, make sure everybody is having open conversations about the college list. Are we all on the same page? Is there a clear understanding of affordability that everybody understands and recognizes? And at some point very soon this summer, having an open, honest conversation about the application strategy, meaning, am I applying to a college early decision, which is a binding process, early action or regular or rolling? All of those processes have different meanings and different timelines. So really having clear communication about what the plan is very important. Of course, that includes your school. Your school has to send the school documents as part of your college application. So making sure, again, everyone's on the same page. It's usually the school counselor or the student's advisor in some capacity, or maybe a grade level dean who is responsible for organizing and sending all of the school documents. So number one, find out who that is at your school. And number two, really be clear about the colleges you're applying to and what the deadlines are. So the school counselor will need to know what to submit and when. And so you want to know, what does the school submit on your behalf? Typically, that means the school's transcript, the teacher recommendations, a counselor or school letter of recommendation, and sometimes often a school profile or things of that nature. How does the school want the student to request those materials be sent? Some schools, it's electronic, it's in an online system or platform such as Score or Naviance. Some high schools utilize the Common App, has a function to invite people to submit. And sometimes, like my old school, I had a good old fashioned paper trail. And so students filled out a piece of paper with all the relevant information. And that's how I tracked what to send and where. Making sure you, the student, and the school counselor is on the same page is really vital. So that strain of communication obviously is very important. Organization. Rielly, do you want to take organization?
Yes, definitely. I love talking about organization, and from the student side, I think this is a huge piece of it. It really actually prepares you for college in a lot of ways too, kind of managing those things. I'm a huge advocate of the spreadsheet method for sure. That kind of allows you to really track, every school you're applying to, kind of what round you want to apply in, additional essays, due dates, things like that. But you can also, of course, if you're old fashioned, you want to write it down. Hand to notebook is also good, or giant post-it note, whatever helps you kind of visualize, your process and help you set deadlines. So, definitely a huge piece of the process. Lots of moving parts. So organization is huge.
Absolutely. My old school trick is putting a paper calendar on the refrigerator and literally marking down dates so parents, important adults and students can all see it and it's all there in one place. But maybe you all have a shared Google Calendar family in your family. So that would be awesome too. Whatever works for you, but make sure everyone has a place to communicate and stay organized. And of course, the final piece, and this is really for students, is dedication. You really have to make this a priority. And to do that, you want to budget your time. Summers for some are relaxed and enjoyable, but lots of students are very busy in the summer. They have part-time jobs, they are camp counselors, they're competing in athletic tournaments, lots going on, family trips. So you really, really want to budget your time. And our suggestion really is weekly appointment on your calendar to do some of this work. And we're not talking about sitting down and doing 2 hours at a time, but if you literally budget yourself 30 minutes to an hour a week, maybe 30 minutes twice a week, you will take little chunks of the work off the to-do list little by little, and it will ease your summer and really significantly impact how stressed or not stressed you are in the fall. So dedication to making a time commitment for a budget. So let's talk a little bit just about the application content, which I alluded to before. So an application packet arrives at a university and it includes, right, the student's academic record, which is typically the transcript. It will likely include some testing information, which would be the ACT or the SAT. And yes, there are still a number of colleges who are test optional, so this may not be part of your particular file, but a number of students out there are still taking tests, and it's a way to demonstrate a high level score, and that's something to add to your profile. But it also may include some testing information that the student reports, such as an AP score, like that might be included in the student's portion of the application. But the ACT and the SAT, they can be reported either in the student's application, which is called self-reported, or they may need to pay and send official scores from the testing company to the college. So in your organization and on your spreadsheet, this is something to note. Do I have to send my score? And if I have to send my score, how does the college require me to get it to them? So those two main things. The other pieces of the application file are your students' activities, both in school or out of school. And of course, the big piece, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, is the college essays. There are actually two parts of this. The Common App itself has one main essay. It's big, it's about 650 words max, and there are multiple prompts for students to choose between to really have the opportunity to write a piece that reflects them. But many colleges have something they call supplemental essays. Those are typically shorter, 250 to 300 words, and those are college specific. You won't know what those questions are until the application in August rolls over to the current, now new senior year. And that's when the colleges publish their separate supplemental questions within the Common App. So you can't really work on those ahead of time. What you can work on ahead of time is your Common App essay. Those prompts are out now, and there's plenty of time to really read through them, brainstorm, and begin drafting that piece of writing.
Beautiful. Yeah, I just wanted to add, Andrea, really quick to those different content, those different pieces of the application. I think it's sometimes helpful to think of them in terms of the quantitative and the qualitative. So for quantitative, you think numbers, grades, statistics, transcript, testing, really help an admission officer, kind of gauge academic preparedness, academic readiness. But those qualitative pieces, the activities, the essays, maybe some more details about a student's background really add to the conversation when really looking through those other kind of quantitative pieces. So important to really have the full picture in the application.
Absolutely, great point. So again, excuse me, the application elements in general, the process, right? You have a school list. All of you out there are going to be applying to a certain number of colleges. The narrative or the essay, this is really the student's opportunity to put their own voice into the process. It's actually one of the only sort of open areas for a student to put their flavor in the mix, so to speak. And then, of course, the application components in our case and situation we're talking about is the common application. which is its own platform that students make an account in, and that's where they fill in a bunch of information and they're actually submitting to the colleges through that platform. So what can you think about now? As we have said, the academic record, right, that is sort of what it is. You've been taking classes grade 9, grade 10, grade 11. Hopefully your grade 12 courses are in place or about to be in place. There's not a lot of wiggle room to make significant changes in that aspect. Testing, again, that is what it is. You register, you do some preparation, you take a standardized test. That's there. That's the piece. Activities in school and out of school, as Rielly said, this becomes part of your personal narrative. And we like to think of this in terms of weaving threads together to make a fabric. So do your activities in or out of school represent a couple different categories? A personal passion or an interest? Are you exploring a major or career path? Are you involved in politics or social justice or within your own church community? All of these things are important components about you and help tell your story. So these are things, again, that we want you to really be thinking about. What are you involved in? What's your level of involvement? And is there opportunity or room to maybe up your game a little bit within those areas? And of course, again, the school list, which we hope is varied and balanced and thoughtfully researched. But if you're not quite there yet, that's another thing you can budget your time to start really digging deeper into your school list. Do you feel confident about your list? Do you feel like it's top heavy? Maybe you have a lot of highly selective schools and not enough sort of good match schools in the middle. Spend some time digging deeper into your list this summer. Again, break it into little tidbits on your calendar, assign yourself, right, an assignment on your calendar and dig a little deeper and make good notes. So academics, as we noted, do as well as you can. This is, every college is going to first look at this transcript. It's the very first, Rielly, right? Very first thing that pops up on a screen,
Yes.
students transcript. So they're going to glance through, obviously, what have you taken over the course of your 4 years? How well have you done? Have you improved your rigor? Have you dipped a little here but made a comeback? Have you challenged yourself outside of your comfort zone? And they're also going to take into account what's available at your school, right? No admissions office wants to penalize you for something you are unable to take advantage of. So for instance, at one of the schools where I have worked, we limited the number of AP classes a student can take. And that was noted in the school profile, in the counselor letter of recommendation. But I also encouraged the student to include that in their additional information section. So there was no way the college rep would miss that little tidbit that that particular school had a particular limitation. Those little tidbits can slide through sometimes. So if you're the student on your application, you want to take advantage of those moments in the application to share very specific things about your school that might be important context for the college admission office to know.
Yeah.
So
I just want to really stress that, Andrea,
yes,
a lot of times I think students, parents get really hung up on sort of like GPA as, as it exists in a vacuum, but that's not really how kind of admission officers are looking at the transcript. They're really taking it in context, looking at it against that school profile that the counselor will provide. And like you said, Andrea, rigor is so, so important. Things like upward trend on the transcript in terms of grades and rigor, really continuing to challenge yourself throughout senior year as well. Those days of taking 12th grade lightly are kind of over. They really like to see that you're still kind of hungry for learning right up until you make that transition to college. So just wanted to emphasize that.
yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And one of our notes here is that the first grading term of senior year is still very important because it gets reported in the college application process. So even if you're applying in the early round of applications, which is typically October, November of senior year, and you will hear those results typically before winter break, which is often when high schools on semesters, they don't even have their semester grades yet. But what happens is the colleges ask the high schools for either a first quarter grade report or an interim grade report frequently. And so it's something to know that, as Rielly said, you can't have senioritis right away. Really not at all, but certainly not right away, because the first grading term of senior year is very likely still involved in your application process. So please keep that in mind. And again, manage your time is key to being successful in the fall. You're going to be juggling a number of things. So you're at senior year classes and doing well, all the senior year activities that come with the start of the school year, but you're also going to be still working on college essays at that point. So again, and maybe you're in a fall sport. So you're going to have a lot on your plate. So really, really considering time management is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
The other key component here is recommendations. And I will say, and Rielly, you can certainly chime in, but in terms of recommendations, most colleges, this is a generalization, but most colleges accept 2 teacher recommendations. And there's a lot of chatter out there about, oh, it has to be one from humanities and one from, sort of the STEM side, which might be true for some students, but not necessarily every student needs to follow that general recommendation. They are often the grade 11 teachers. So if you haven't asked somebody from junior year yet, and now it's summer, it's okay. You can email them. They will check their emails when they're back at school. But probably a number of you have already asked those junior year teachers for those recs. They tend to be from academic core subject areas. And what I mean by that are the math, science, English, history, or social science, and languages. So those 5 core academic areas. But there are always exceptions, particularly if you're going into a design type of major, or of course an art or fine or performing arts major, you would want somebody from those fields, right, to write on your behalf. But if you are a very serious, strong STEM major, it might be your inclination to want a math and a science teacher to write for you. And while there's nothing necessarily wrong about that, I will tell you from my experience, and Rielly, if you feel this as well, please chime in, that often even engineering or strong STEM majors, they like to see a well-rounded student. And so having a humanities teacher send something in on your behalf is actually quite welcome. I don't know, Rielly, if you've had that experience or not, but I have several friends at highly competitive sort of STEM-focused colleges who say it's refreshing when they get an English teacher or a history teacher to write about them. So have you had that experience, Rielly?
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I think first and foremost, for me as an admission officer, having read files, what matters most to me is kind of those anecdotes, those stories, those kind of moments where you can really see how a student's contributing in the classroom. So first and foremost, I would say pick a core class, a core teacher who may have seen you, you know, um, expressing some kind of strength or community care or something like that that isn't really, maybe present in the rest of your file. I think having a teacher who ideally likes you and knows you really well is the first and foremost. But if you have a couple of those and you have to choose between, subject areas, I do think it is refreshing to kind of show, here's my interest, but I also do well in these other classes, or I also, try really hard in these other classes. And kind of on that same note, you really don't need to necessarily have an A in the class to ask for a recommendation. I think sometimes the classes we struggle in the most expose our character the most. Maybe you had to stay late, work harder, go to office hours, really communicate with that teacher. And that can be a story that an admission officer would be really interested in hearing. So it shows maturity, it shows the ability to kind of face challenges head on. So don't, necessarily get too caught up on only asking A's. You want to focus on people that can share some insight into how you navigate your life and how your mind works. Yeah.
Absolutely. And 2 little points about this as well. So number one, I know I mentioned most colleges accept 2 teacher recommendations. It's possible they only accept 1. It's possible they don't take any. And just so you know, there's nothing your school can do about that. That is set by the college and it's set in the system, and the school can only submit what the college will allow them to submit. So please don't go to your school and complain that they can't send to you. They really can't. If the college has set that parameter, then they can't do more than they're allowed to do. So and it often comes up a question about, well, what about a senior year teacher? And the hesitancy, I think, for most counselors would be that by the time you're applying in October, November, a senior year teacher hasn't really had you in class long enough to really be able to speak to your full rate capabilities. But there are exceptions to that as well, right? If you're applying in the January round, the second round of applications, a senior year teacher certainly would have had you in class long enough to maybe include. Maybe it's a teacher that you had in 10th grade and now will have again in 12th grade. And early on in senior year, they've seen significant growth in you since they had you last. So it's not impossible to ask a senior teacher, but for the most part, the general recommendation is keep them in grade 11. You certainly don't want somebody from grade 9 or 10 only, because you've changed and grown so much since then that it's not sort of an updated, accurate picture of your day-to-day work in the classroom. But something that you might consider is if you're at a school where your teacher also advises a club you're in, or maybe is a coach of a sport you play, like they know you in multiple ways. So that might be an even stronger representation of you in a teacher rec. So just a couple things to consider there.
Mhm.
So testing, another piece of the puzzle that the most infuriating answer for students and families from a college counselor is it depends. It depends. So our general recommendation is, because it is so up in the air, there are colleges going back to requiring testing. Things change frequently throughout the process. Our recommendation is still to go ahead and take the test. And if you can score well, then you've got that in your hand. And if you don't score well, it does not represent your true ability, then your school list will be impacted in a good way by schools who are not requiring that test. You're only going to apply to colleges who are not, who don't require that. So again, something about that organization and communication early on is on your spreadsheet, you want to look up, do they require testing? Again, if they don't, this means something different if you're going to be test optional. Obviously, you can include those schools on your list. The general goal is to finish up your testing by the end of junior year, right? This summer, if possible. Again, that's simply because you have so many things on your plate between now and application, right, due date. The PSAT, which lots and lots of high schools give to juniors, some even give to 10th graders, that is not used in any way, shape, or form in the application. You don't self-report it. The high school does not share it. The college doesn't want it. It's not included at all. The only little tidbit about the PSAT is that you, if you score well enough in your region, you might be named a national merit semifinalist. You'll find that out in early September. And that might be something you would include in the honors and awards section of the application. So just keep that in mind this fall. If you are an amazing standardized test taker, that you might qualify for this, not this level, and you'll want to include that in your application. Okay, ACT or SAT? Famous question, right? You should decide immediately if you haven't decided yet. And our recommendation is you take a practice test of each one, and you will feel the difference. They're different paced, they're different strategies. And so figure out which format suits you best. And then that's your goal, right? To focus on prepping for that one test. You don't take them both. There's no reason to take them both. And hopefully you can wrap this up still this summer or by early fall. And there are still test dates happening in the summer that even for the late registration, you're still in time for. So jump onto those test companies' websites to look that up. If this is sort of your next step, you can see when the next test date is and when to register. So make sure you're checking that out. If you are applying later in the year, you're going to wait, have senior year, first semester grades under your belt. You want that upward trend. There are plenty of dates in the fall of senior year to take some tests to include for the January application deadline. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we talked about test prep strategy. It's really great if you can do this the summer before 10th and 11th grade, but depending on, maybe you're a fall athlete, maybe you are competing in tournaments all summer long, this may not be possible for you. So obviously being organized and thinking ahead to plan ahead about test prep and when you're taking that test is very important. A final piece about testing is if you have accommodations at your school for learning, if you have an IEP, if you receive extended time, this does not automatically guarantee your approval for extra time or accommodations on the ACT or the SAT. So you must go through your school's counseling office to apply for and get those accommodations. And there's slightly different processes for the SAT or the ACT. So make sure you are in communication, there's our word again, with your school counseling office to make sure you understand how to apply for the accommodation and what is needed to supply to the school to submit for those accommodations. Rielly, anything I'm forgetting in there about testing?
I think that was comprehensive. That was perfect. I've
Excellent.
got nothing to add.
Great. Excellent. I love that. Okay. So activities in school. Riley, I'm going to hand it over to you. Let's talk
Right.
about what you're involved in.
For sure. This is one of my favorite pieces. So activities in school. Of course, these show how well you can take advantage of opportunities sort of in your immediate circle, right? Like how you're impacting your immediate peers, your teachers, people in your school community. And colleges really are looking to get to know what you're interested in and how you show up in your community that way. So, ways to show this, of course, leadership, such a hot topic. It looks great to show when anytime when you've been given increased responsibility over time with a club or a team or, any kind of school community, this signals that your commitment has been recognized. But, of course, that's great. But you don't necessarily have to be the captain or president of every single team or club. Maybe you lead a fundraiser for an issue that's important to you. Maybe you mentor a younger player on a team, impact your team in a different way. So I think the main word to think about here is impact. Have you impacted your peers, teammates, school in general, both in big and maybe subtler ways too? Initiative is another way to think about these things. So maybe you've started your own clubs or organizations. Maybe you've revitalized an old club, or brought new programs or changes to a club, to an existing club. Or maybe you've sought out opportunities that kind of show your own academic curiosity, or community concern. So both are ways to show you taking initiative kind of outside just essential classroom duties. Um, in general, admission officers really like to see consistent, kind of sustained commitment to a group or cause rather than, you know, loading up on club senior year and kind of just checking the boxes for your college applications. They can kind of tell, because activity charts share how long you've done these things, how many years you've done them, how much time it took up in your week. And so AOs will kind of, gauge how long you've been committed to these activities and see how serious you are about it. Another thing I like to kind of bring up when thinking about activities is sort of depth versus breadth, in that activity chart. So a lot of times, I think students get caught up in being super well-rounded, needing to do a million different things. But realistically, colleges now are looking for their community to be well-rounded, not necessarily every individual student. So, if you have one or two kind of deep interests and you've gone really deep with those, that's just as valid as having a lot of different interests, that you've explored. So both depth and breadth are valid, and show kind of different types of strengths, different types of students. Um, you know, yeah, so depth shows kind of commitment, consistency, whereas, breadth shows a desire to explore and expand. And depending on the school, both are valid and great. So, yeah, just a word about activities. And then another kind of exercise when thinking about your activities and how they contribute to your overall narrative, is this adjective exercise. So, if you think of 5 words or phrases that describe you as a student, example like engaged, caring, service-oriented, dedicated, passionate, things like that. Um, Thinking about, taking a moment to write an essay about a brief essay about each of those words, maybe a moment in the last 2 years where you've really demonstrated those characteristics, can be a really good way to kind of start thinking about your, essays that you might have to write for those kind of supplemental prompts. And it really starts helping you reflect on, yourself. A lot of times these essays are the first times that students are writing a personal narrative, outside of the classroom. So thinking really about how you define yourself and ways that you've shown that is a great place to start.
Absolutely. And one thing I was thinking, Riley, when you were speaking about the narrative, the initiative,
Mm.
I had a student recently who they had a really challenging math class in high school, and she created a study group within the class, and really, really did help the group. And the teacher actually commented on her initiative to do this on her own. Sort of went above and beyond to create this group to support her classmates, but also they sort of this team effort to study and improve. And so when Riley says it doesn't have to be the title, right, of captain or leader, there are ways to show that initiative and leadership, in again very small and nuanced ways. So, but the adjective exercise is terrific, and I will say a very common supplemental essay question is: tell us a community you are a member of and tell us about your role within that community. Um, or, right, so this is a way, like if you're writing down your activities and thinking about sort of these anecdotes, that will help build towards you being able to answer some of these supplemental questions.
Totally.
Okay,
That's actually
Rielly, how
a
about
really, yeah.
activities outside of school? Here we go.
Yeah, that was actually a really good segue because my first kind of note about outside of school activities is the definition of community, which I think, you kind of
Yes.
just touched on, Andrea. So community can really be a lot of different things. It can be your school, it can be actually your family, your immediate, nuclear community, or it can be your town, a city, a region. It can, expand from there. So I really like to encourage students not to underestimate kind of the definition of community and the fact that that family piece is important. So, AOs love to hear what you do for your immediate circle. Maybe you're responsible for taking care of a younger sibling, going to the grocery store, cooking dinner, taking care of an elderly family member, things like that. So activities outside of school don't just mean, big research projects or prestigious summer programs, although they, can include those things. It's also sort of how you spend your time, family wise, hobby wise, things like that. Again, I'm going to, of course, bring up impact here. How have you or how can you impact the spaces that you inhabit? I think trying to focus a lot on authenticity here is also really important. So not getting too caught up in what our college is looking for or checking those boxes, but what is truly meaningful to me as a student, right? It's hard to believe, but the admission process really is still very human. And the people reading your applications are trained to kind of find the thread, like Andrea was talking about before, between your activities and your essays and your grades. So they really want to distill kind of what makes you tick. And they do this, through seeing what kinds of activities you throw yourself into. Um, I think another thing to think about when thinking about activities outside of school is kind of it's a great way to show the ways that you might step out of your context, right? So sometimes, school clubs and teams are sort of not necessarily handed to you, but are sort of right there in your immediate world. So I think, outside activities can really start to kind of make you more unique, and show ways that you're seeking, new learning, new growth, ways to apply your interests and passions that other students in your school or immediate kind of community may not be doing. It also shows, ways that you could be bringing those passions back to your peers, at school if you, kind of step out and bring something back to them. That's a really nice testament to initiative, like we talked about. So yeah, so just don't forget, admission officers love part-time jobs. That shows consistency, usually experience working as part of a team in some way, needing to be reliable and manage your time. Faith-related commitment is also super valid and important to include. And then, like I already talked about, kind of family responsibilities and hobbies. They really want to know not just, the prestigious awards and accomplishments, but kind of how you're spending your time outside of school in general as well.
Absolutely. I think something you touched on, Rielly, is so important. College admissions officers, I think lots of students and families get caught up in trying to look the most impressive and tell colleges what they think they want to hear or see. And in reality, they want to know what makes a student tick. Who are you as the student in your community? Who are you in your day-to-day life? They want to know you for who you are, not who for what you think they want you to be. And so the theory behind that, the method behind that is because you're going to be living on their campus and they want to see how you will take advantage of their campus community and opportunities to engage yourself in college. Like, who will you be in their community? And so they're getting these insights from how you're presenting yourself right in your application. So authenticity is really hard for a teenager, right? Like, be who you are. It's really, really hard. But if you trust the process and present your authentic self, admissions officers are going to see you for who you are. They really, I know in this era of tens of thousands of applications, it seems hard to believe, but they really are looking for who the student is as a person, not just checking boxes of all these impressive like activities and jobs and things like that. So
I'll
trust
say
yourself.
I'll add to Andrea, similar to what you were saying before about like seeing, you know, a super STEM school, seeing a humanities
Yep.
recommendation. It's super refreshing sometimes to just see a hobby on there that that won't get a kid necessarily any like accolades or, you know, kind of recognition, but something that they enjoy is also really, really nice to see. It can really be humanizing. So don't hold those things back.
Yep. I will say a favorite story a student shared with me, and an admissions rep confirmed. They had this like personal goal. I don't know why, this personal goal to solve a Rubik's Cube underwater. Like, I don't know, like, why would they do, but that, and they did it, and they wrote about it in this, like, this sort of supplemental essay. And the admission officer loved it because it was so unique and so unusual. And it was sort of like this refreshing, insight into who this young man was. So again, there are ways to show yourself, right, without these checkboxes and impressive titles. So again, stay true to yourself. Okay, college list. So often students, it's easy, right, to get caught up, and often students say, well, here are the top 10 business programs, so I'm going to apply to these 10 schools. Well, the problem with that is we believe strongly in fit, community fit, cultural fit of the college, as opposed to just, is it a number one program in the country for this? And yes, obviously there's good meaning behind some of these rankings, and some of that is important. But if you're in a college community that is filled with like the type A, go-getter, A+ student, every single point matters, and you aren't wired that way, that's who you will be surrounded with by in every class and in every assignment. And it might not be the best academic community for you. So we really like to think about fit rather than name. Of course, we're going to take strength of program into consideration, but we believe there should be some other factors, and of course, building a balanced list. You've worked hard, you want to stretch for some of those reach highly selective schools. And there are a number of schools in the middle that you look like a very good fit for, not 100% guarantee, but with a good read, like should be a possible, very possible admit. And then having some likely options we feel very strongly about. You are likely to be admitted, right? You're above their admitted profile. They are likely to offer you merit money or special opportunities at the school. And in any crazy admission year, if the world fell apart, right, you want to have some lovely, wonderful, likely options under your belt, that you could easily choose and go to and have a good experience. So that's what we are thinking of in terms of list and balance. A couple ways to engage with colleges from your list, is to visit admission reps when they're coming to your high school. So high schools spend all fall traveling around the country visiting high schools. And so this is something you can check at your school. Communication with the college office, the school counseling office. Are there admissions rep coming to your high school this fall? How do you sign up to go? The admissions reps show up. They give a little 15, 20-minute speech. You put a face and a name together. It's a nice connection, and you can ask some questions specifically, maybe for your own insight and your own application. So definitely consider that opportunity if it's available at your high school. But in terms of building the list or refining the list a little, there are lots of factors that come into play that could be important to you and, of course, your families. What do they have my major? Is there flexibility to change major? How difficult is that to change majors? Am I okay to go away from home? Do I have a health condition that I'd rather be within a certain radius of my home healthcare team? Did I go to a small high school? And if I go to a large state university, am I going to be lost in the crowd? Have I always been the big fish in the small pond right? And I'm comfortable in that size community. Thinking about cost, I mean, which continues to rise, tuition and room and board, and all the incidental costs involved, right? Often meal plans, books, study abroad option, like all of these extra fees might come into play. So really be informed when you're thinking about the total cost of attendance. It's not just the sticker price. Of course, your interests. Are you okay with the student life? Is it heavily Greek, meaning sororities and fraternities? Is it more an academically competitive community? Do they have no football? Like, these are all things, right, which can play into your happiness on a day-to-day level at the school, which impacts your success. And of course, is it an urban campus, a suburban campus, a small town campus? Do you even know what that means? Have you ever been on one of those types of campuses? I'm guessing that wherever you live, you can find those types of schools relatively easy within driving distance. Even if you never apply to those schools, go take a tour, go walk around to see if that campus style is a good fit for you. And that will immediately help you start shaping up your list. Because trust me, an urban campus is for some kids and not for other kids. Being on a small liberal arts campus out in the beautiful wooded area is definitely for some kids and definitely not for some kids. So put your feet on some local campuses and start to figure this out for yourself. So lots of tools available to help you with your list, create a list, hone your list. Again, if your school uses Naviance or Score or Maya Learning, they actually have programs built into their system, so you may already have access to this. There are free aspects of programs out there from College Kickstart. College Board has an amazing free program called Big Future, where you create this account, you plug in your wishes and your data, and it spits out like lists of schools for you to consider or research. Definitely take a chance and look at that if you haven't tried it yet. Of course, there are lots of guidebooks out there. You can look on Amazon, look in the library. There's a bunch out there on the college process. But two that we particularly like are the FISC Guide to Colleges and Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be. Again, that book really focuses on finding the right fit college, making the most available to you at that college will really actually help you set you up for success as much or more so than those highly ranked programs at schools. So just keep that a little bit in mind. Okay, this summer, right? Here we are. It is June, friends. We are in June. So what can you be doing, right, to be productive and stay on this timeline to make the most of this time and your process? So number one, academics. If you haven't selected senior year courses yet, or that's still up in the air and not confirmed, as Rielly said earlier, think about rigor. Think about, are there places you can up your game? Those classes are going on all of your applications. So they will see your senior year courses. So make them count. Testing, if you need to take some tests, if you need to do some test prep, again, schedule this in. You want to make sure, right, that you have a plan that will fit your timeline. So if you circle November 1, the most common early application deadline there is, and backtrack week to week, you'll actually see your runway. And then you start putting things on like a wedding, a family vacation, a fall trip. Like it's shorter than you think it is. So today, let's make a calendar and map this out working backwards. School activities, think about your senior year. What can you volunteer for? What can you step up and do? Can you run for an office? Can you create a fundraising, a plan or opportunity for your team or club? Show that initiative. Outside of school activities, if you haven't gotten a summer job or signed up for a summer camp or started volunteering yet, there's plenty of time. Let's do that. Maybe you're interested in exploring a career. Maybe your parents or your friends' parents have people working in those industries that you could interview or shadow. Again, not a defined plan, but something that shows your initiative. So think about these things now. It's not too late. It's not too late. One thing you need to do right away, and I know I said the Common App doesn't roll over until August 1st, but you can create your account now and start filling out your name, your address, your high school information, all the little sort of tedious nuts and bolts you can be working on right now this summer. It will automatically roll you over. You won't lose your information if you create your account today when it rolls over on August 1. So again, another thing you can start checking off your list to do if you create your Common App and start filling out the little easy portions.
I'll add there, Andrea, too.
Yes.
The Common App is very user friendly, but
Yes.
I often find the longer kind of students are in there, the more comfy they are with it,
Yes.
the better those applications end up looking, the cleaner, more professional they end up looking. Kind of a pro tip is to go in and use that preview button for every section.
Yes.
See how your activity list will look to an admission officer. Really, really edit it. And the more time you have to do that, the earlier you start, the the better it's going to end up looking. So, yeah.
So true. And a pro tip on Rielly's pro tip, when you're looking at the PDF preview, look at your activity section in particular. You may not see that it cut off a letter or part of a sentence, but it might. And that's the only way you will catch it, by looking at that PDF preview. So excellent pro tip, Rielly. Excellent. Um, so building your list where you might have holes in it, or narrowing your list by researching and fine tuning it. Again, make yourself an appointment. Maybe you do 2 30-minute appointments each week, one for Common App, one for research, or one for essay writing, one for working on my resume, whatever that is. But put these times on calendar so you can really map it out. And of course, the biggest piece for the summer is really starting to brainstorm your Common App essays and getting that draft ready. Your goal should be to have your Common App essay basically ready before August 1st. Because once August 1st happens, you want to dedicate the remaining time to all the supplemental essay questions you're probably going to have to be writing in August, September, and October. Okay? And one thing about essays, again, this is sort of a little pro tip, avoid too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Get a trusted adult, an English teacher, your mom, your Aunt Susie, somebody to give you that reflection. I'm going to read through this with fresh eyes, look for words that you might have misused. Your brain runs right over these because you're working on it so much. You miss things that look obvious to someone else. So, but if you start involving 3 or 4 people editing your essay, it becomes confusing and frustrating. So our advice really is to pick one person, and then maybe when you're back in school, ask your senior year English teacher to look it over, maybe if you want, but really pick one trusted person as your main voice of reason, and trust that. Okay, Rielly, do you want to start a little bit here with sort of like, let's talk about the actual personal statement in the Common App, sort of brainstorming and drafting?
Yeah, totally, totally. So I feel like, the timeline for, we've already kind of really driven this home, but the timeline for success in your essays really depends on your ability to manage that time, to set small goals, to hold yourself accountable kind of every week for some progress in this. So, as we sort of talked about, Common App prompts actually are released in February for the personal statement. So a lot more time to work on that. The Common App rolls over, as Andrea mentioned, on August 1st, which means you can kind of start adding the schools on your list and see their specific supplements on August 1st. So that time, February to July to August is a really great time to really, get your personal statement pretty close to finish. I'll also say to, don't underestimate sort of the brainstorming piece of this process. This is, your 650 words to really encapsulate and embody sort of everything you want to say outside of your activities and, grades and things. So take some time to really look over these prompts, start to think about, what stories or pieces of you might fit those prompts, and try to really consider what essay will allow you the most space to show who you are, to show examples, to show anecdotes, things like that. And just to clarify, I think we've made this clear, but the personal statement is that longer Common App essay that typically goes to every college you're applying to. So this is yours, right? This is not so much, trying to worry about fit in this essay. It's more about who you are, how you've grown, what lessons you've learned over time, what you hope to continue learning, really, what you will be taking with you to a college campus that of your choice. And of course, those supplemental essays that will be released in August are very specific to those schools. And that is, a chance to actually, you should do more research on that school, on the types of values, traditions, beliefs that school has, maybe, specific programs, qualities about the school, classes, things that you like about that school that you think make you a good fit. That's going to come into play more usually with those supplements. So don't be afraid to do some research for those. But luckily, you have March to July to do your personal statement, and then usually kind of August, October ish to work on those supplements, unless you're, applying in the January round. So it's kind of basic timeline, basic sort of breakdown of the essay writing.
Yep,
Did I miss anything,
absolutely.
Andrea?
No, you got it. You got it. And I
Okay.
think Riley touched on this about sort of the objective of the personal statement, the main Common App essay, right? Is they aren't activity driven, right? They don't want a litany of your resume. And I know sometimes parents get caught up in that. And it's actually not what you want to do, right? As Riley suggested, they want to know a moment in the story, right? Not all the building blocks of every single step. They want to know the personal narrative piece of that. And so, what does the essay say about me? Like, what do I want them to know about me? This is who I am, what I've learned, how I show up. As Riley said, like, this is your moment in the main essay. Whereas the supplemental essays are very specific. They're going to ask you pointed questions that you actually have to pointedly answer. So in the main essay, you really, really want them to know you, the student. So in the Common App basics, I know we've talked about several of these pieces, but things that are helpful when you're creating your Common App and working on your Common App is get a copy or an unofficial copy or have access to your online gradebook of your transcript so you can enter all of your past classes and potentially grades. Does your school offer any activities and words list? Parents, you might have, like, somebody's going to forget what they did in ninth grade if they got a book award or a department award. So help them with that. There's a whole section for those awards. Activities, which is basically the resume, test results if you're submitting those. And there's sections on the Common App that the student has to fill out about their parents or legal guardians. So they may be asking you some questions as they're filling this out. So again, create the Common App account. You can do that now. It will roll over. Then you start adding colleges. And some families worry about this. The colleges, they actually can tell if they are on your student's Common App, but they don't know who else is on the Common App. So, and actually, if you have them on your Common App, they will start contacting you, and that's through marketing, and that's actually demonstrating some interest. So don't be afraid to go ahead and add some schools onto your Common App list. And then there is a button in the Common App for the student to invite another outside person if they would like, as a reviewer. So it might be the school counselor. Perhaps your school wants you to invite them. And it doesn't mean they can work on the application. It just means they can view it, a PDF of it, and they can offer insider guidance. So just keep that in mind if that's a helpful piece. Some tips, again, give yourself a time and stick to that time. Make a schedule. As both Rielly and I have said, be as authentic as you can. Do not, when you're writing essays of any sort, rely on spell check, right? A word can be spelled correctly, but be the wrong word or the wrong use of the word. One of my tricks of the trade is when you have your draft sort of fully written, either read it out loud to someone else or have them read it to you. Again, there's something in your brain that catches through one of those scenarios that if you're just reading over it yourself, your brain just goes right past. So really, really helpful sort of trick there. On your spreadsheet or your giant Post-it note, whatever you're using, make sure you're looking up every college's application requirements. Some of this varies. It's more than just the typical application packet. You may have to apply first, and then an essay shows up in your applicant portal later. You may have to submit, if you are a fine or performing arts student, submit a portfolio before you apply. Some colleges want you to apply first and then submit the portfolio. So you want to be able to keep track of all of these moving pieces. And the biggest pro tip of all, do not wait for the deadline to apply. Always, always, always apply before the deadline. Always. Systems crash, students get sick, things happen. If you give yourself a 2 or 3 day window buffer, you will thank yourself later.
Absolutely.
Rielly, any closing thoughts before we offer up our closing poll?
No, I mean, I think you covered it. I always like to stress authenticity at the end. Just authenticity, time management, really make sure that preview button in the Common App, go through, really look at how you're presenting yourself. Um, and I mean, that's the whole piece, that's the whole process really is how am I presenting myself? How am I using the application components to tell my story? And hopefully at the end, you're a fully realized kind of holistic person. You get not just your grades, but you also get your story, your activities. and also people talking about you in there too. Your teachers get to speak on your behalf as well. So
Yeah.
start early, take it slow, break it into chunks, and be as real as you can, I think is the kind of the
Yeah.
closing thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Riley, if you'll do the poll, the poll is really, you're welcome to reach out to either Riley or I at ESM Prep. You can easily find us on the website. But we're at this opportunity. If you'd like to answer some of these questions, we're happy to follow up via this route as well. So we'll give you a minute here to answer this. But Riley, I hope I speak for you as well. It's been our privilege to be here today and walk you through some of this information. And we certainly wish you all the best as you are approaching this summer and this college process. We know it feels overwhelming. We know it feels like you're never going to make it, but I promise if you do break it into chunks and little by little map it out and stay true to your schedule, it will happen. It will all happen. And before you know it, you'll be looking at this process in the rearview mirror and enjoying the second half of your senior year. So thank you again, everyone, for your time. Happy to chat with you if you'd like to follow up with us in any way, shape, or form. And Riley, thank you for your time today. Always a pleasure sharing the screen with you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.